The Nightmare Shift, the Titan Station maximum security facility, hung in the void like a metal tumor against the starfield. Built in the shadow of the dead planet, Zarian Prime, it housed the galaxy's most dangerous criminals in cells that could withstand nuclear blasts. The facility's rotating sections created artificial gravity, and its quantum-locked containment fields were considered unbreakable by galactic standards. Zix-9 clicked his mandibles nervously as he followed Captain Sarah Chen through the pristine corridors of Level 7. The insectoid guards for arms trembled slightly as he gripped his plasma rifle, compound eyes darting between the reinforced cell doors that lined their path. Each door bore warning symbols in 17 different languages, and the creatures behind them represented nightmares from across the galaxy. Captain Chen, Zix-9's voice buzzed through his translator. I must ask again, why are all the guards on the night shift human? My people have served the Galactic Correctional Authority for 3 centuries. We have excellent reflexes, enhanced sensory perception, and natural armor plating. Sarah Chen walked with the casual confidence of someone who had seen everything the universe could throw at her. At 5 feet 6 inches tall, she seemed impossibly small compared to the 8-foot-tall insectoid beside her. Her graying hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her weathered hands rested casually on her sidearm. She had been guarding the worst criminals in the galaxy for 15 years, and it showed in the way she moved through the facility like it was her own living room. You'll understand soon enough, rookie, she said, her voice carrying the weight of experience. The day shift is different. Prisoners are calmer when the suns are up, even artificial ones. But when the facility goes dark and the night cycle begins, that's when the real monsters come out to play. They stopped at Cell 7A, where a soft purple glow emanated from behind the quantum barrier. The nameplate read Vorthok, the Dream Eater, in standard galactic script. Sarah tapped the observation panel, and the barrier became transparent, revealing a writhing mass of translucent flesh covered in pulsing veins. The creature's dozens of eyes focused on them immediately. Vorthok here feeds on fear and despair, Sarah explained matter-of-factly. His species evolved on a world where psychological warfare was the primary form of hunting. He can project your worst memories directly into your mind, make you relive every trauma you've ever experienced. As if summoned by her words, Vorthok pressed against the barrier, and Zix-9 suddenly stiffened. The insectoid's compound eyes dilated, and his breathing became rapid and shallow. Images flashed through his mind, his clutchmates dying in the great hive war, the smell of burning chitin, the screams of his people as their world burned. Stop, Zix-9 whispered, his weapon clattering to the floor as he clutched his head. Make it stop. Sarah stepped between the prisoner and her partner, blocking the creature's line of sight. Vorthok, knock it off. You know the rules about tormenting the new guys. The alien prisoner's mental assault ceased immediately, and it retreated to the back of its cell with what might have been laughter. Zix-9 stood trembling, his exoskeleton slick with perspiration. How, he gasped, how were you not affected? Sarah shrugged. Humans have a strange relationship with our trauma. We don't bury it or forget it. We carry it with us, integrate it into who we are. Makes us harder to break because we're already broken in all the right places. They continued down the corridor, past cells containing horrors that defied description. There was the Bone Sculptor, a crystalline entity that could reshape living matter with a thought. The Void Whisperer, whose very presence caused reality to bend and twist. The Hunger, a collective consciousness that had consumed entire star systems. Each of these creatures, Sarah explained as they walked, represents a different kind of nightmare. They're not just dangerous physically. They attack the mind, the soul, the very concept of what it means to be alive. That's why they're here instead of regular prisons. An alarm suddenly pierced the air, and red lights began flashing throughout the corridor. Sarah's communicator crackled to life. "Captain Chen, we have a situation in Cell 7M. The Screaming Dark has somehow destabilized its containment field. It's not broken, but it's weakening." Sarah grabbed her communicator. "On our way, initiate lockdown protocol, Omega-7. As they ran toward the crisis, Zix-9 struggled to keep up. "What is the Screaming Dark?" "Something that should never have been allowed to exist," Sarah replied grimly. "It's a fragment of a collapsed dimension where physics work differently. It exists in a state of constant agony and wants to share that pain with everything it encounters." They arrived at Cell 7M to find a nightmare in progress. The containment field flickered like a dying light bulb, and through the gaps, tendrils of absolute darkness writhed outward. The darkness moved wrong, bending space around it, and wherever it touched the walls, reality seemed to crack like broken glass. 3 alien guards stood frozen in terror outside the cell. A Valorian with his natural armor plating had begun to crack and bleed simply from looking at the entity. A Christic engineer was curled in a corner, his 6 arms wrapped around his head as he gibbered in his native language. The third, a proud Thrakari warrior known for his battle prowess, was weeping openly. "It's getting stronger," one of them managed to say through chattering teeth. "The containment field is failing, and we can't get close enough to initiate the backup systems." Sarah assessed the situation calmly. The manual override was located just 3 meters from the cell, well within the range of the entity's psychological attack. Any being that got close would be overwhelmed by the creature's emanations of pure despair and existential dread. "Zix-9, maintain distance and be ready to call for backup if something goes wrong," Sarah ordered. Then, to the creature's astonishment, she simply walked toward the failing containment field. The effect was immediate and horrifying. The air around Sarah began to shimmer with dark energy, and whispers in languages that predated civilization filled the corridor. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds, and frost began forming on the walls. The entity's influence washed over her like a tidal wave of hopelessness, but Sarah kept walking. Her step never faltered, her breathing remained steady, and her hands moved with practiced precision as she reached the manual override panel. The darkness pressed against her mind, showing her visions of universal entropy, the heat death of all stars, the ultimate meaninglessness of existence. "Yeah, I've seen this movie," she muttered, inputting the override code. "Tuesday nights in my 20s were worse than this." The backup containment field activated with a satisfying hum, and the writhing darkness was pushed back into its proper dimensions. The whispers faded, the temperature returned to normal, and the entity retreated to sulk in the deepest corner of its cell. Sarah dusted off her hands and turned back to the group of stunned aliens. "Crisis averted. Make sure maintenance checks the primary field generators tomorrow." The Valorian guard stared at her in disbelief, his armor still cracked and bleeding. How did you resist its influence?" "I have 3 centuries of combat experience, and I was paralyzed with terror." "That's your problem right there," Sarah replied, helping the shaken guards to their feet. "You've had 3 centuries to learn what's worth being afraid of. Humans only get about 80 years, so we can't afford to waste time being scared of everything." As they walked back to complete their rounds, 6-9 buzzed with confusion. "I don't understand, Captain. If humans are so resilient, why don't you rule the galaxy?" Why do you serve in positions like this instead of leading? Sarah paused at an observation window that looked out into the star-filled void. Because resilience isn't the same as ambition, rookie. Most of us are just trying to get through the day without everything falling apart. We don't want to conquer the galaxy. We just want to make sure the monsters stay locked up so everyone else can sleep peacefully. They continued their patrol, passing cells containing creatures that had terrorized entire sectors. Each one tested them in different ways. The probability thief tried to convince them that their weapons would malfunction at the worst possible moment. The echo of malice attempted to turn their own thoughts against them. The living equation sought to reduce their existence to mathematical formulas and solve them out of reality each time. Sarah remained unaffected while Zix-9 struggled against influences that his species had no defense against. By the end of their shift, the insectoid guard was exhausted, his nervous system overloaded from constant psychological assault. "I think I'm beginning to understand," he said as they completed their final security check. "It's not that humans are immune to these effects. You feel them just as strongly as we do." "Stronger, probably," Sarah agreed. "Our nervous systems are designed to feel everything intensely. Pain, fear, joy, love. We don't have the luxury of emotional dampening like most species." "Then how do you function? How do you walk through hell and come out the other side?" Sarah smiled, the first genuine expression of warmth Zix-9 had seen from her all night. "Because we know something that most species don't. Hell isn't a place you visit. It's a place you live in, day after day, until you learn to make it home. And once you're comfortable in hell, everywhere else is just a vacation." The shift ended with the artificial dawn, and as the day guards arrived to take over, Zix-9 realized why humans were the only beings trusted with the night shift. It wasn't because they were fearless. It was because they had learned to function, despite their fears, to find meaning in meaninglessness, and to keep going when everything else would have given up. As they walked toward the exit, Sarah turned to her partner. "Same time tomorrow, rookie, and don't worry, it gets easier." Zix-9 clicked his mandibles in what might have been laughter. "I'm not sure I want it to get easier." "Good," Sarah replied. "The day it gets easy is the day you've lost something important, and in this job, that's the day people die." Asterisk, the test of fire 3 weeks had passed since Zix-9's first night shift, and the insectoid guard had begun to understand the subtle rhythms of Titan Station's darkness. He had learned to recognize the signs of impending trouble, the way the air grew thick before the Dream Eater stirred, the subtle vibrations in the floor that preceded the bone sculptor's attempts to reshape its cell, the temperature fluctuations that meant the screaming dark was testing its containment. But nothing had prepared him for the emergency klaxon that shattered the artificial dawn on his 22nd day. Sarah Chen arrived at the security center. At a dead run, her off-duty clothes hastily thrown over her uniform. The main display showed a facility-wide alert, with red warning lights flashing across every level. Warden Korvac, a 7-foot-tall reptilian administrator, stood before the tactical display with his scaled hands clenched into fists. "Report," Sarah demanded, sliding into her command station. "It started 47 minutes ago," Korvac hissed, his forked tongue tasting the air nervously. Cell 7X's occupant began exhibiting unusual behavior. The whisper has been silent for 3 years, but this morning it began projecting its consciousness beyond its containment field. Sarah's blood ran cold. The whisper was the facility's most dangerous prisoner, a being of pure psychic energy that had once controlled the minds of an entire star system. It existed as a collective consciousness, able to dominate any sentient being within range of its mental influence. The creature had been contained using a combination of quantum barriers and psychic dampening fields that kept it isolated from any other minds. "Containment status?" she asked, her fingers flying over the control interface. "Holding, but barely," Korvac replied. "The entity is somehow drawing power from an unknown source. Our psychic dampening fields are operating at maximum capacity, but they're not designed for this level of output." On the security monitors, Sarah could see the effects of the Whisper's influence spreading through the facility like a virus. Alien guards stood motionless in corridors, their eyes blank and unseeing. Maintenance crew members had abandoned their posts and were walking in perfect unison toward Cell 7X. Even some of the prisoners in nearby cells had fallen under the entity's control, their various species united in the same vacant stare. "Captain," Zixnin's voice crackled through the communication system. "I'm trapped in level 5. The entire section is compromised. All the guards are moving like they're sleepwalking, and they're trying to disable the security systems." Sarah studied the tactical display. Nearly 60% of the facility's staff had been affected, including most of the security personnel. The Whisper was systematically taking control of every sentient being within its expanding sphere of influence, turning them into extensions of its will. "Korvac, get me a head count of unaffected personnel," she ordered. "The reptilian wardens." Claws clicked against his tablet as he compiled the data. 17 humans scattered across various levels. 3 Thrakari warriors in the armory who are somehow resisting, and 2 Valdorian engineers in the reactor core who are naturally psychic resistant. 22 people against an entity that can control minds, Sarah muttered. "And it's getting stronger by the minute." As if summoned by her words, the facility's main power grid fluctuated, and the lights dimmed throughout the complex. The Whisper was drawing energy from the station's systems, using it to amplify its psychic abilities. If it continued at this rate, it would soon have enough power to break free of its containment entirely. "Captain Chen," Korvac's voice carried a note of desperation, "I'm recommending evacuation. We can seal the facility and call for a fleet. Bombardment? It's the only way to ensure the entity doesn't escape." Sarah looked at the display showing the affected personnel. 63 beings, including alien guards who had served faithfully for decades, now stood vacant-eyed and motionless throughout the facility. They weren't evil. They were victims, trapped inside their own minds, while the Whisper used their bodies as puppets. "Negative," she said firmly. "We don't abandon our people, and we don't let this thing get loose in the galaxy." She activated the facility-wide communication system. "All unaffected personnel, this is Captain Chen. We're implementing Protocol Omega Black. All humans report to designated rally points. Non-human personnel with psychic resistance, maintain your positions and await further orders." Zixnin's voice came through the cum again, strained with effort. "Captain, the affected personnel are organizing. They're moving in perfect coordination, like they're all part of the same mind." "That's exactly what they are," Sarah replied. "The Whisper isn't just controlling them, it's turned them into a collective consciousness. Every person it affects becomes an extension of its will." The tactical display showed the controlled personnel moving through the facility with impossible coordination. They were systematically disabling security systems, opening cell doors, and working to free the other prisoners. The Whisper wasn't just trying to escape. It was orchestrating a complete prison break. "Ma'am," came a voice from level 3. "This is Sergeant Martinez. I've got 12 humans with me, and we're seeing something impossible. The controlled personnel are working together like they've been planning this for years. They know exactly which systems to target, which protocols to bypass. Sarah realized the terrifying truth. They have access to everyone's memories. Every guard, every technician, every administrator that's been affected. The Whisper knows everything. They know. Emergency lighting bathed the facility in red as more systems came offline. The entity was systematically dismantling the station's defenses from within. Using the knowledge and access codes of the people it controlled, Captain Zixnine transmitted, "I'm watching something that defies explanation. The controlled personnel are moving through areas that should be sealed. They're opening doors that require multiple authorization codes, accessing systems that should be impossible to reach. They're not bound by normal security protocols," Sarah replied. "When you control someone's mind, you don't just get their body. You get their knowledge, their access codes, their understanding of the facility's weaknesses." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Whisper had turned the station's own personnel into the perfect infiltration force, and it was using their combined knowledge to orchestrate an escape that would release every dangerous prisoner in the facility. "All units, new orders," Sarah broadcast. "We're going to do something that's never been attempted before. We're going to take back this facility room by room, person by person. The affected personnel are not our enemies. They're our colleagues who need to be freed." She paused, knowing that what she was about to say would sound impossible to any non-human listening. The reason human guards are assigned to the night shift isn't just because we're stubborn. It's because we're immune to psychic manipulation. Our minds are too chaotic, too contradictory for entities like the Whisper to control. The explanation was simpler than it sounded. Human consciousness was a product of millions of years of evolution in a hostile environment. The human mind was designed to function under extreme stress, to maintain individual identity even when faced with overwhelming pressure to conform. Where other species had evolved collective consciousness or hive minds, humans had developed fierce individuality. "Martinez, take your team and secure the reactor core," Sarah ordered. "We need to cut the Whisper's power source. Johnson, you're with me. We're going to cell 7X. As they moved through the facility, Sarah and her team encountered the full horror of the Whisper's influence. Guards they had worked with for years stood motionless in corridors, their eyes reflecting an alien intelligence. When they moved, it was with perfect synchronization, dozens of bodies acting as one mind. The most unsettling aspect was the silence. The affected personnel didn't speak, didn't show emotion, didn't react to the presence of their unaffected colleagues. They simply carried out their tasks with mechanical precision, their individuality completely subsumed by the entity's will. "It's like they're already dead," whispered Johnson, a veteran guard who had served on Titan Station for 8 years. "They're not dead," Sarah replied. "They're trapped, and we're going to free them." They reached Cell 7X to find it surrounded by a circle of controlled personnel. The beings stood perfectly still, their combined psychic energy being channeled into the entity's containment field. The Whisper was using their minds as amplifiers, drawing power from their consciousness to weaken its prison. ****. The containment field flickered and sparked as the entity pressed against it from within. Through the quantum barrier, Sarah could see the Whisper's true form, a writhing mass of psychic energy that hurt to look at directly. It pulsed with malevolent intelligence, ancient and patient and utterly alien. How do we break the circle without harming them? Johnson asked. Sarah studied the formation. The controlled personnel were arranged in a perfect pattern, each one positioned to maximize the psychic resonance. Breaking the circle would require precise timing and coordination. We don't break it, she said. We redirect it. She pulled a device from her equipment belt, a portable psychic amplifier normally used for communication with telepathic species. The Whisper is using their minds as a network. If we can introduce interference into that network, we can disrupt its control. The plan was desperate and dangerous. Sarah would need to enter the circle of controlled personnel and place the amplifier at the center, directly adjacent to the Whisper's containment field. The psychic feedback would be intense enough to potentially damage her own mind. Captain, let me do it, Johnson offered. I've got less to lose. Sarah shook her head. This is why they pay me the big credits, Johnson. Besides, I've been dealing with alien nightmares for 15 years. What's one more? She moved toward the circle, and immediately felt the Whisper's influence pressing against her mind. It was like walking through thick liquid, each step requiring tremendous effort. The entity's consciousness probed at her thoughts, seeking cracks in her mental defenses. But where other species had evolved minds that could be easily influenced or controlled, humans had developed something unique, the ability to hold contradictory thoughts simultaneously. Sarah's mind was a chaos of conflicting emotions, memories, and ideas that no external force could organize or control. She placed the amplifier at the center of the circle and activated it. The device emitted a high-frequency psychic pulse that interfered with the Whisper's control signals. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The controlled personnel stumbled and shook their heads as their individuality reasserted itself. The psychic network collapsed, and the Whisper's containment field stabilized. Throughout the facility, affected personnel began to recover as the entity's influence weakened. What happened? Gasped one of the guards, a Valorian who had been under the Whisper's control for hours. I remember walking toward something, but I couldn't stop myself. You're free, Sarah replied, helping the disoriented guards to their feet. The Whisper tried to turn you into puppets, but it underestimated something important about consciousness. Individual will is stronger than collective control. Over the next few hours, the facility slowly returned to normal. The Whisper retreated to the deepest corner of its cell, its escape attempt thwarted. The other prisoners were secured, and the damaged systems were repaired. As the artificial dawn broke over Titan Station, Zixneen found Sarah in the observation deck, looking out at the star-filled void. The insectoid guard's mandibles clicked thoughtfully as he joined her. Captain, I need to ask you something that's been troubling me. Why did the Whisper's influence not affect you? I understand that humans are resistant to psychic manipulation, but what you did today was beyond resistance. You walked directly into its sphere of influence and remained completely unaffected. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering how to explain something that even she didn't fully understand. It's not that we're immune, she said finally. It's that we're incompatible. The Whisper, like most psychic entities, seeks to impose order on chaos. It wants to organize thoughts, control emotions, create a perfect collective consciousness where every mind serves the same purpose. She gestured toward the facility around them. But human consciousness is built on chaos. We're a species that evolved from competing tribes, conflicting ideologies, and individual ambitions. Our minds are designed to function in disorder, to find meaning in contradiction. Zixine processed this information, his compound eyes reflecting the distant stars. So the whisper couldn't control you because your mind is too disorganized too. Control, not disorganized, Sarah corrected. Diverse. Human consciousness isn't a single unified thing. It's a collection of competing thoughts, emotions, memories, and impulses that somehow manage to work together. When the whisper tries to impose its will on that kind of mind, it's like trying to conduct an orchestra where every musician is playing a different song. The insectoid guard clicked his mandibles in understanding, and that's why humans are the only species trusted with the night shift. Not because you're fearless or immune to the prisoner's abilities, but because your minds are too chaotic for them to control or influence. Sarah nodded. We don't guard these prisoners because we're superior to other species. We guard them because we're the only ones who can't be turned into weapons against the galaxy. And sometimes that's exactly what the universe needs. As the day shift arrived to take over, Zix-9 realized that he had witnessed something extraordinary. The human guards weren't just prison personnel. They were the last line of defense against horrors that could turn anyone else into accomplices. Captain, he said, as they prepared to end their shift, I have one more question. Do you ever wonder what would happen if humans decided to use their psychological resilience for conquest instead of protection? Sarah smiled, the expression carrying both warmth and warning. That's why we don't, rookie. Because we're the only species that truly understands what monsters look like. And we've seen what happens when they're allowed to run free. We guard these prisons not just to protect the galaxy from the creatures inside, but to protect ourselves from becoming the very monsters we're meant to contain. The shift ended with the artificial dawn, and as they walked toward the exit, Zix-9 understood why deathworld prison guards were always human. It wasn't about strength or courage or stubborn determination. It was about the simple fact that in a universe full of minds that could be controlled, influenced, or manipulated, humans remained stubbornly, chaotically free. And sometimes freedom was the most dangerous weapon of all.